My name is Keiichi Ogawa. I'm a learning assessment specialist. So I'm going to talk about basic understanding of learning assessment. The outline of the presentation is the following four. First, what is learning assessment? Number two, how to develop assessment criteria. Number three, key principles to design assessment criteria. Number four, assessing students' performance. Then I have some references for you. So first, what is learning assessment? Learning assessment is an evaluation of students' learning achievement. So learning assessment informs us of how well students have mastered and what they need to improve. Moreover, it allows teachers to develop better teaching programs. So in other words, learning assessment is we can find out how well students have mastered and what they need to improve. Not only that, it also helps us, teacher to develop better teaching programs. So this is the learning assessment. So learning assessment is fundamental part of learning process. So learning assessment, we have types of learning assessment. So there are various types of learning assessment. We have summative assessment. We have interim assessment. We have formative assessment. But all assessments have in common is that they provide a snapshot of student understanding at a particular time in the learning process. I'm going to talk more details of those three learning assessment. So first, formative assessment. The purpose of formative assessment is to monitor students' learning and inform weakness to improve. The timing is during a learning process. So it's during a learning times, so anytime we do formative assessment. In terms of grade, there's little or no impact on the grade. So we can say low stakes. Next, interim assessment. The purpose of interim assessment is to evaluate students' mastery and prepare them for summative assessment. The timing. Timing is between the unit of instructions. So timing is between the unit of instructions. Then, what about the gradings? Carry more weight compared with formative assessment. Then, summative assessment. The purpose of summative assessment is evaluate students' mastery. And the timing. Timing of summative assessment is at the end of the course. So grading. Grade for summative assessment is a large impact and a high stakes. So the grade, the scores of the summative assessment is really linked to the grade of the course. I'd like to talk each by each. So first, formative assessment. The goal of formative assessment is to monitor students' learning process and diagnose students' strength and weakness. More specifically, formative assessment helps students identify their strength and weakness and the target areas that need to work. So assessment as learning. Also, formative assessment helps students recognize what students are struggling and address problems immediately. Assessment for learning. So formative assessment. Formative assessments are generally low stake, which means that they have low or no impact on students' final grade. For example, formative assessment include quiz, homework, observations, like attitude in class, note-taking, and also self-peer evaluations. And the formative assessment, there is a cycle of formative assessment. The 4 cycles are clarify, elicit, interpret, and action. So clarify. So clarify big picture, learning, goals, and what students need to learn. So clarify that. Then elicit. Eliciting evidence of students' mastery through teaching practice. So elicit. Then interpret. So interpret is evaluate and interpret students' mastery based on learning objectives. Then actions, act. So act. For instance, teacher, adjust the way teaching instruction. Student side, act on the feedback they have received. So act. So cycle of formative assessment is clarify, elicit, interpret, act. Then clarify, elicit, interpret, act. Then clarify, elicit. So this is a cycle. Next, interim assessment. Interim assessment is part of formative assessment, which helps us to understand if students master specific standards and are ready to move on. So formative assessments are given in one class. Interim assessments are usually conducted across many different classes or across an entire class, entire schools. The term used similarly with benchmark assessment or midterm assessment. This is an interim assessment. So next, summative assessment. The goal of summative assessment is to evaluate student learning at the end of the instructional unit. Summative assessments are often high stakes, which is important for students' final grade. Examples of summative assessments include examination, essay, report writing, project, presentation, and oral examinations. So this is what I explained. Formative assessment, interim assessment, So interim. So we always have formative assessment, interim, and formative, interim, and in the end, summative assessment. So what I want to say here is formative assessment is really important. Then interim and the summative assessment by the end. So second, how to develop assessment criteria. Starting from learning outcomes and objectives, we define assessment criteria and the specific tasks. So we have 4 areas. Those are specific tasks. Okay, so 4 areas. 1, learning outcomes, learning object, learning assessment criteria, then assessment task. So I'm going to explain each by each. First step is learning outcomes. Expected learning outcomes. So outcome draws a vision for what kind of person in the nation or country wants student to be. At this point, it might be very abstract. So the example case. Let's say science, topic of lights, learning outcome. Student will be able to demonstrate his knowledge and understanding of characteristics of the light. So this is, let's say, examples. It's a science class. So based on that, next step is define learning objectives. So teachers need to identify objectives for each subject throughout school year, semester, and unit. They often follow national curriculum. So this is an example. I continue from the previous slide. So settings. Students light an object and observe the size of shadow on the screens. So learning objectives. To be able to explain the relationship between the size of the shadow of the object in relation to the distance between lights and the screen and the position of the object. So this is learning objectives. So then defining assessment criteria. We sort of define criteria. It can be 4 performance level, 3 performance level, that's fine. So let's make it like a 4 performance levels. The assessment criteria changes in the shadow size can be explained based on the positions of following 3: light source, object, and the screen. So performance levels. 1 is not learning much, but 2, 3, 4 go up, and 3 is students learn much more. So for that, we have this learning assessment criteria. So number 1, let's set these criteria. Number 1, condition of change in the shadow size can be explained based on the position of the object. If students understand this, okay, this is the assessment criteria number 1. Number 2, second is condition of changes in shadow size can be explained based on the interrelated positions of the light source of the object. So it's more advanced, how much students understand. Number 3 is a condition of change in shadow size can be explained based on the interrelated positions of the light source, object, and screen. So screen is added. Next levels. So number 4, performance criteria is condition of the change in the shadow size can be explained using sample of the interrelated positions of the light source, object, and screens. So I'm using this sample here, the lights, and then the clock, and the shadow. But criteria number 4 is the student can use it, explain this using other examples. So the sample should be added. Maybe you can use the student use it like for example, sunlight or other things. So samples, so the next levels, assessment criteria. So design the assessment criteria. So we normally use a Rubik. Setting evaluation criteria by the performance level for multiple times become Rubik. So Rubik for writing assessment, for example, rubric for writing assessment. So I made 1, 2, 3 assessment levels. Then you can make, for example, comprehensive understanding, organization, language, format. So then design assessment criteria, rubric for writing assessment. Yeah, we assess writing. That rubric is, for instance, like this. The scorings. Scoring scale 1, 2, 3. So if it's like 1, it's a black or the black word, right side. Yeah. So number 1, comprehensive understanding. So scoring, if it's 1, student did not understand the objectives of the assignment, organizations. The argument has many logical leaps, making it difficult to read. Language, there are both grammatical mistakes and the typo errors. Format, writing in appropriate format. So that is a 1, scoring scale 1. So student performance is not so good. If it's 2, comprehensive understandings, student understand the objectives of the assessment. So student understand that objectives of assessment. Organizations, the argument is coherent and logical, but lacks reasons. Language, no typo errors, but both some no typo error, but some grammatical mistakes. Yeah. Then number 3, assessment criteria scorings. This is a very good one in terms of the writing assessment. So comprehensive understandings. Students understand the objectives of the assigned and provide deep discussions. Organization. The argument is coherent and logical and includes reasoning. Yeah, it's more advanced. Language. No grammatical errors, no grammatical mistakes, and the typo errors. Format. Writing in appropriate format as specified. So we have we made rubric and we sort of make assessment criteria. Yeah, it's regarding writing assessment. Then number 3, next sections. I'd like to talk about key principle to design assessment criteria. Principle 1, objectives oriented. What knowledge and skills do students want? What knowledge and skills do you want students to have? For example, how do we measure mastery? Do not set unrealistic goals. Prepare suitable assessment tools. Please take note that objectives oriented. Principle number 2, objectivity and fairness. It should be really fair to the students. So knowledge assessments are easy to meet since quizzes, examination show test scores. On the other hand, it is difficult to score skills tests, including writing, performance, or creativity. So learning assessment must set consistent standards to grade student performance. So this is a principle 2, objectivity and fairness. Principle 3, transparency. So teacher must be able to explain when students complain about their grades. So if the student complain, teacher has to explain. So usage of rubric is recommended because it is easy to show which specific points need to be improved. Number 4 principle, efficiency. maybe this is also quite important, efficiency. Teachers should use the limited time available effectively, not to devote too much to the evaluations. For example, in the class with a large number of the students, it may not be realistic to conduct detailed assessment, although it would be desirable. So, assessing student performance. Let me explain further. So, which I explained just now. One, learning outcome. Second, learning objectives. Three, learning criteria. Then assessment tasks. Then summative assessment. Here, learning assessment, the red word, we have formative assessment, which I explained, reflections. Then formative assessment and reflection. So therefore, formative assessment is really important, as you notice here. Just, of course, summative assessment is important, but the formative assessment is like a UNESCO really focusing on this nowadays. So what kind of a task can be set to understand student learnings? That is really this formative assessment. So the learning assessment task, that is a key point for the students' performance evaluation. So creating assessment tasks. Assessment task is specifically designed task to give students an opportunity to demonstrate. So how well students are achieved, how are progressing towards achieving the intended learning outcomes. So assessment tasks should reflect what students learned in line with assessment criteria, inform where students are struggling. Yeah, so those are the assessment tasks should sort of included, covered. So learning assessment student performance. So Bloom's taxonomy. They are saying that those assessment, one is remembering, next, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. So if you want to assess remembering, recall specific facts and knowledge. You want to assess students' understanding, grasp, explain meaning of the ideas. Applying, if you want to assess students' applications, then use knowledge, skills in new settings. Analyzing. We identify, analyze patterns, organize the ideas. That is, you can use it for the student assessment in analyzing and evaluating. Critically examine, inform, and make judgment. And creating, use ideas, create something new. So creativities. If you want to assess student creativities, so this creating. So I want to explain more on this. So this is my final slide. So assessing student performance. So frequently use verb based on Bloom's taxonomy. So verbs that we use remembering. You want to assess remembering? Like a list. List this. Ask student, list this. Give the numbers. Memorize this. Note this. Highlight this. So those are the rememberings. Understanding? Describe. Ask students, describe this. Explain this. Yeah? Express this. That is assess understandings. When we assess, apply, use the verb, demonstrate, observe, edit. Yeah, so those are words. Assess, analyze, research, categorize, compares. Yeah, those are words. If you want to assess students' evaluations, evaluate, assess, criticize, yeah, reflect, those are the words, verbs that we use. Then last, create. So design, develop, solve, manage. Those are the words that if you want to assess students, create. Yeah, the verbs that we use it, so I sort of explain to you. So that is the first part of my sessions. Then, if you'd like to review more papers, here are the reference. So please read those papers to understand, to enhance your understandings. Thank you very much. That is my first presentation.